The time has finally come to start talking about possible draft picks for the Anaheim Ducks, but we've had to pivot a little bit. I'll talk about that on this edition of Locked On Anaheim Ducks.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason J.D. Hernandez, and this episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. Just download the Game Time app and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. That is the Game Time app. As I mentioned, I'm Jason Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for well over a decade. I've done work for Defend the Nest, covered the San Diego Gulls, and also currently the public address announcer for the Coachella Valley Firebirds, who are still in the playoffs, by the way. In fact, they are well up in their series as I'm recording this. So yeah, as you can see, I'm live in Wisconsin right now, hoping to see the Firebirds finish off the Milwaukee Admirals. But we're not going to talk about that today. No, we're going to talk about draft stuff. Now, I've been wanting to do this for a little bit. Obviously, there's been some travel going on and working games, and I finally had to pivot. And the reason I had to pivot with some picks is because the Ducks draft order kept going down and down over the last couple of weeks. I fully anticipated that they were going to lose the second round, and they didn't. And I thought they would lose in the conference finals, and they didn't. So I've kind of had to reposition my expectations as to who might fall to the 31st pick in this year's NHL draft. And part of the reason I waited is because, to peel back the curtain, we're doing a mock draft for the Locked On NHL Network. And there was a couple of picks that kept slipping further and further. So I thought, okay, these two names haven't been called yet, and I actually haven't made my pick yet, but there's a few names that haven't been called yet that I'm hoping don't get called at all. And I'm going to start with my number one. So I actually have a list of about 3 or 4 names, and I'm just going to go over 3 or 4 of them today. And top of my list, as far as players that have not been chosen yet, is Andrew Basha, a left winger for the Medicine Hat Tigers. Now, the reason he's at the top of my list is for the sole reason that he's fast. He's got a motor on him. One of the better skaters in this draft, but also one of the more dynamic skaters in this draft. And this is me watching a little bit of clips and just trying to take as many notes as possible. He's 6 foot even, $185 from Medicine Hat Tigers. He's only 17 years old, turns 18 later this year. One of the better passers in this draft, but also one of the best players in terms of hockey sense. Now, he is very fast moving. He's he goes in short bursts. In other words, he uses that motor to get to 50-50 pucks as well as possible. One of the best 50-50 puck retrievers in this draft. Great skating posture. He utilizes his frame probably better than most defensemen. Even though he's only 6 foot and $185, he handles the puck in the corners very well. He has a great ability to trap the puck if his team is up by a goal or two. Like, we're talking late game situations, your team is up by a goal and you just want to trap the puck into the corners. He fends off defenders very well. So got to give him props for that. As far as statistics, 63 games, 85 points in 63 games, above a point a game, 30 goals, 55 assists. On a team that features 2 other highly touted draft picks, or highly touted prospects, rather, Caden Lindstrom, who was expected to be a top 5 pick in this year's draft, and Gavin McKenna, another solid prospect for the Medicine Hat Tigers. And I actually like both of those guys a lot. And I actually haven't talked on this podcast about why I prefer Levshunov over Caden Lindstrom. who plays for Medicine Hat. But as far as other players on that Medicine Hat team, I love Basha's game quite a bit. I love his motor. I absolutely love his supreme ability to get into the zone as easily as possible. In fact, his overall grade, according to Mitchell Brown, his overall is a 99, which is very good compared to some of the other draft picks that have been taken already. Space creation is way up there as far as wings. Entries. Entries are a massive plus to his game. Once he enters the zone, actually, there's my note. Okay, so once he enters the zone, he looks for the perfect pass, and his high hockey IQ gives him the ability to get a high danger shot. And I think the reason I said that was because there was a couple of plays that I watched where he made the right decision on those highlight reels. And both times where he carried the puck into the zone himself. And that's something that every team needs and every team wants, is you don't want to have a guy that's going to mishandle the puck or lose the puck, right at the blue line. You don't want that. You want someone that's going to have the ability to carry it in. You want someone that's going to look for those outlet passes, someone that's going to take it from blue line to blue line. And he's both great at giving those outlet passes, but also receiving those outlet passes. Shooting is good. Puck handling is good. But the passing and the hockey IQ and the skating are what make him a pick that Ducks fans could hope to watch out for and see if he falls to that 31st. The only reason he falls to that 31st is the skating does trail off a little bit towards the end of games. Shooting could be a little bit better. But physical game, he's got a fairly physical game for someone of his size. And I would, only because I've seen him up close, I would liken him to Ty Cartier, formerly of the Firebirds, currently of the Seattle Kraken, who's another kind of small-ish winger with a decent body but a good skating ability, and someone that traps the puck, and someone that isn't afraid to take a hit. And that's the kind of player that I think Pat Verbeek would want, someone with a little bit of physicality, and someone that I think Greg Cronin would want. So that's top of my list. All right, we're going to head into the first intermission. I've got some more names I want to break down on the other side. And now a brief word from Game Time. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier, but also NHL Stanley Cup Final tickets. Prices on the Game Time app usually go down the closer it gets to the start of the game. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. And you could browse through specific games or matchups that you want to attend. There's flash deals, zone deals, views from all seats, and they have a lowest price guaranteed, event cancellation protection, which is important for those games 6 and 7s, and job loss protection. So take the guesswork out of buying finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Once again, you're locked in with Jason JD Hernandez. We are talking about draft. And I think some of you have been waiting for me to do this. Now that we know it's that other pick is going to be 31st or 32nd, now I can kind of pivot and look at some other names that could fall in this draft. And I will admit some of this is based on our own mock NHL draft. And there's a couple other names that I want to look at. I'm going to... this is kind of tough because there's a couple of players that I really like that haven't been picked yet. I'm going to go with Dean Letourneau, who's a center from Boston College. Another fantastic skater, and he's got size, another good passer. I don't know if the Ducks need another center, but when I looked at some of his highlights, I thought, well, this kid's kind of too good to pass up, if you ask me. Another solid pick, Letourneau, I think, because he has the physicality and because he has the size, again, another player that kind of fits that mold that Pat Verbeek and Greg Cronin would like. I think I am looking for players that fit a certain mold because these are players that I want, but also players that I think would actually get picked by this current regime right now. Very, very raw talent, very good transitional player. He's 6'7", 210. More so 6'7", 215. If he can fill out a little bit more and get to 6'7", 220, then you could look at comparisons to someone that the Ducks did not have the ability to pick. I mentioned this name on a previous podcast. If the Ducks had picked earlier in a particular draft, they could have gotten Tage Thompson. And that's my comparison with Dean Letourneau. Super physical, super great passer. Great puck handling, especially for a guy his size. The only knock on his game is the hockey IQ and the skating. In the USHL, or rather in St. Andrews College, he played 56 games, scored 127 points. That's under 18 AAA. Very, very skilled. But he's considered like a one-of-a-kind player because he has great tools for someone of his size. Now, he crushed his opponents. Then again, we're talking AAA hockey. Most people he's playing against don't have that kind of size. But I wouldn't knock that on his draft projection. He is still projected to be a first-round pick. And he's a great hitter. Has an absurd amount of handle when it comes to protecting the puck. That's one thing that I really like about his game is his puck protection. Just got to work on the skating, got to work on the pace. That's the kind of bigger knock on his game. So once again, Dean Letourneau. Another guy that I kind of liked, and actually there's a few guys that I like in this draft. But I'm trying to think of guys that I think might fall to that 31st or 32nd pick. You never know. And there's a few guys that kind of fit that mold. Who else was I looking at? I mean, I was looking at Nikita Artemonov, but he is from Russia. There's still a little bit of rawness in his game as well. So I don't know if he's going to drop that far. There was another name that hadn't been picked that I like a lot, and that's Michael Hage from the Chicago Steel, another center. But another name that I'm going to talk about a little bit is Sam O'Reilly. Sam O'Reilly is a winger from the London Knights. If that's a name that you haven't heard of, you probably should get used to hearing Sam O'Reilly's name because he played terrifically with the London Knights. Made it all the way to the Memorial Cup, or rather the OHL Finals. Another solid player. Now, some projections have him as high as the 20s and others as low as the 40s. So this one is a big risk reward pick, but someone that I hadn't seen yet. And the reason that his stock has gone down quite a bit is because of his skating. But one of the better hockey IQ players, despite his skating being below par. 56 points in 68 games. Someone that is, you ready for this? Kind of a pest. Now think about this. Someone that plays forward, plays wing and center, that's kind of a pest. Who does that remind you of? Oh, that kind of reminds you a little bit of Corey Perry, doesn't it? I'm not going to make that comparison, but just saying I kind of love those pesty type players that can annoy opponents. So Sam O'Reilly's game I like a little bit. And I actually have a couple more names, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to head to the second intermission right now, talk about two more names on the other side. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you are locked in with Jason JD Hernandez. I've got a couple more names here. One of them is a defenseman. Yeah, the other one is not. But I'm going to start with the defenseman. So 2 more names that I had looked at that I really liked. And I'm going to start with Stian Solberg from Norway. The Ducks do like those Scandinavians, as we've seen in the recent past. We love those Scandinavian players. And I think that Stian Solberg is one of the better Europeans on this draft. 6'2" defenseman, over 200 pounds, from Norway. He played in World Juniors this past year and actually looked pretty good in World Juniors. He also came in very late in the season at the World Championship. Norway gave everything they got to Czechia, who eventually won the tournament, and Solberg was right there as a 17-year-old in the World Championships. I was impressed with this game. I kind of looked around and said, "Oh, who's this kid? Like, he's pretty good." So I actually had to look that up. And he was one of the better physical players on that team. Probably the most physical defensive defenseman in this draft. That's something that the Ducks actually need. They need a defensive defenseman with some size. Someone that's going to drop the hammer on opponents. In Norway on Valerenga, 42 games played, 15 points, but much more just of a skater, a passer, and someone that uses his physical ability to just kill plays, knock off opponents, using an active stick, just preventing guys from doing anything. And I will give credit, at least he's not bad or dumb with his penalties. The penalties that he has taken, and I'm kind of reading like a little bit about him, the penalties that he does take, there's none that are really stupid. And he plays the game with some intelligence, which is what you want. And you want that from someone that is going to use his physical ability, but also do it in a way that's not going to hurt his team and kind of hinder his opponents. So again, someone that I was pretty impressed with in watching some of the film, and someone that I was impressed with in the little action that I saw when it came to the World Championships, and especially World Juniors. He dominated in World Juniors. He looked really good. So that's one name that I really like. One more name, and then we're going to wrap it up. And we're going to go with, again, Ryder Ritchie. Yes, another Ritchie. Super good in transition. Someone that evades opponents very well. Great bursts of speed. 6 foot, 175, from the Prince Albert Raiders. He just turned 17 this past season with Prince Albert. In 47 games, he scored 44 points. Pretty solid. Puck handling, one of the better puck handlers in this draft, one of the best shooters in this draft, but he wasn't the top shooter on his team. But he was the WHL Rookie of the Year on a very low scoring team. And for him to put up those numbers on a slower paced team, I think is pretty solid. So Ryder Ritchie, another name to watch out for from Prince Albert of the WHL. What I liked about his game is the slot passes. He has the great ability to get pucks into the slot. And once he goes into full speed, he has great puck handling ability. He's one of the dirtier danglers out there. He's got a dirty dangle. So yeah, I like him a lot. So those are a few names that I was kind of looking at that might fall to that 31st or 32nd pick in this year's NHL draft. All right, I think that's going to do it for this podcast. Once again, thank you all so much for listening. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, this podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, among others. You could follow me on Twitter X at StimpyJD. The show's Twitter X is back, and it's at LO_Ducks. You could email me your questions at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com, or you could ask me questions on Twitter X as well. Someone asked when the next mailbag is going to be. Probably when I get home if it's not too busy, but also when the mailbag gets full, I plan on doing a mailbag episode. It could be from Acrisure Arena. Who knows? But in the meantime, thank you all for your continued support. It is so greatly appreciated. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason JD Hernandez saying have a great rest of the day. Please remember to be safe out there. Please be kind to one another, and Ducks fly together.